Hey everybody, and welcome to the Startup Savant podcast. I'm your host, Ethan, and this is a show about the stories, challenges, and triumphs of fast-scaling startups and the founders who run them. This week, we're joined by Tony Tran, co-founder and CEO of Lumanu, a fintech startup that offers a platform for creators and contractors to manage their finances and get paid faster. We got into the value of embracing the power user when building ambassador programs, and something near and dear to my heart, we chatted about the importance of having a coach or a mentor, the difference between the two, and when you should be thinking about getting one or both yourself. But before we get into my conversation with Tony, make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you're listening from, and check us out on social media. We are at Startup Savant. Now, let's get into my chat with Tony Tran. Tony, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Ethan. I'm doing well. Weather's good, it's not raining, can't ask for anything better.
That is pretty much all we should ask for, and I'm stoked you've got it. All right, so let's start off real easy. Tell us, what is Lumanu?
Lumanu is a payments and financing company in the creator economy. The way I tell everyone is, we are building the financial infrastructure for the future of creative work. You think about the millions and tens of millions of people out there who are not W-2 employees, who are either creators, independent freelancers, or even small business owners that are doing the work that used to be done by entire full-time teams. And they have a lot of needs around getting paid on time, managing their financial health, dealing with taxes, paperwork, etc. And Lumanu helps all of that. We also help the businesses that pay them.
And how did you identify, and then how did you validate that this was a problem that needed to be solved within that creator economy?
That's a great question, Ethan. I have usually starts with, who really matters to me and then what problems do they have? So just to give you some context, when I started Lumanu, I wasn't actually keening in on the problem to be solved, but I knew the demographic I wanted to solve for. My family immigrated from Vietnam in 1994 to South Carolina. We had a very atypical group of workers. I was the only one that went to college, got a W-2 job. Both my siblings dropped out of community college, started their own business. My dad was sort of like a freelancer. And one of the things that I think we as full-time employees sometimes take for granted is it's really nice to have a paycheck every couple of weeks. You don't have to invoice your CFO. But I knew that there was a big generation, and it's only getting larger every single day, that does what I would call non-traditional work models. They don't check in, check out, get a paycheck, have automatic Social Security and all those deductions. They're essentially their own boss. And I knew I wanted to build a company for them. The question of what is the biggest problem to solve took a while to iterate through. But eventually I just had a eureka moment when I realized, gosh, it would really suck if I finish my work as a salaried employee and don't get my paycheck.
Yeah.
And the reality is that's what a lot of non-W-2 employees have to deal with. Imagine finishing work for a client or selling something on YouTube, but not getting the money that you've earned, 30, 60, 90 days later. And that was sort of the catalyst for everything that became Lumanu.
Where were you hearing about this issue? I mean, because I've worked with freelancers and contractors and the like on the side of the client for many years, and I'm happy to say that I always pay the people that are helping me out.
Yeah.
So I guess I don't sit in the circles of the freelancers themselves, but where were you hearing that this was an issue? And is this something that happens like a high percentage of the time, or is it just something that happens a high, like raw numbers amount?
It actually happens quite a lot. I can share with you actually how I first discovered the problem, which then actually had a lot of sort of influence around how I started the business and sort of the initial sequencing of features that we built. Before Lumanu, I was at another startup, and we dealt with a lot of enterprise clients. Think Hertz, Starwood, Marriott. When you are working at those companies, and we were in marketing startups, actually saw the type of what I would call vendors they work with, right? And vendors could be anything from a freelance photographer that comes into a hotel to take photos, to copywriters, to basically any type of creative talent that is not on salary. And it was just mind-boggling to me, the amount of paperwork and processes that one of those vendors have to jump through. If you're a photographer earning $5,000, you have to go through the exact same number of hoops as a software company selling $300,000 software to Marriott. And you can almost imagine, right? If you're the finance team at one of these big enterprises and you have a stack of bills to pay and is always growing, that one freelancer, that one independent is going to be pretty far down the list.
Right.
And it's just not even, it's not necessarily they had bad intent. It's just the reality of the situation. They can't do faster than net 30, sometimes net 60, net 90-day terms. So my joke all the time, when I talk to employees, when I talk to investors is getting paid is so much more than moving money from point A to point B, right? There's so much anxiety around, am I filling out this form correctly? Did I put in the right bank account information? What if I move? What if I get married? What if I, turn my sole proprietor into a LLC or an S corp? Did I update all the right documents? All of those things go into what I would call the human element of getting paid. And that problem is an unsolved problem. And that's why there's a lot of friction with getting paid today. Even if you always get paid on time, which is actually very rare, there is still a lot of work you have to do. And then, of course, remembering to, pay your quarterly taxes, keep track of your own stubs, if you will. Which, W-2 employees get that taken care of for them. But if you're your own worker, your own solopreneur, your own business owner, you have to deal with that yourself.
Right. So what's the form factor that this product takes or this service takes? Is it, I'm assuming it's an app. Is this something that if I'm, a freelancer and I'm going to work for one of these, large organizations, am I coming to them and saying, hey, you need to use this service because this is the service I use, or does the large company already use the service and then that's what they choose to pay me through? Or how does the relationship work and who brings Lumanu to the table?
That's a great question. So we actually have a distribution channel that's broken into two. So you actually hit them both. Our primary distribution is we actually go out and sell to businesses. So our customers are, big enterprises like Walmart. We work with Evolve. We also work with smaller businesses, anywhere from 5 employees all the way up to tens of thousands of employees. And the best way to think about our software for those folks is it's almost like a payroll software, but it's meant for your non-W-2 employees. So anyone that you work with anywhere in the world, whether it's an influencer, a digital creator, freelance copywriter, even, small agency that's helping you with your out-of-home advertising, any of those folks, you can essentially pay with one-stop shop through Lumanu. And the nice thing is, as your partners, right, as your creators are getting their work done throughout the month, they can get paid instantly. Then our customers, the Walmarts of the world, just pays Lumanu back in one big invoice at the end of the month, and they can actually pay that on their own terms. So the whole pitch to a Walmart is your talent gets paid when they get their work done, but then you can pay us back whenever your finance, processes dictate. Now, as more and more people get exposed to Lumanu, right, the people that have to sign up for Lumanu to get paid, then they realize, wow, I can actually download the Lumanu app on the Android and App Store and actually start using Lumanu to invoice even businesses that are not Lumanu users. So, if you are a freelancer, you can actually download Lumanu today and start using Lumanu to invoice anyone in the world and get paid. And the nice thing there is Lumanu actually handles all of your taxes, paperwork, W-9s, W-8s, so you don't have to deal with any of that. And we have something called early pay. So let's say you're working with BMW, which is not a Lumanu customer. And BMW tells you, hey, great work. You'll get your paycheck in 90 days because that's our default payment terms. You can actually log into the Lumanu app and get your money immediately.
As the freelancer, you can log in.
As the freelancer. Yeah, so we have an app for freelancers. Yep. Okay,
so this really brings up a big question. You're probably floating quite a bit of cash. So are you, how are you operating? This is maybe a silly question. Where are you getting the money to pay if you haven't been paid yet? Is there just a huge pile of, Bitcoin sitting behind this? Or are you taking loans to pay for this before you get paid? How does this work?
So that is actually the beauty of being a startup. A lot of people realize early on that you can raise capital, right, in the form of venture equity. So that's where you give up, portions of your company to venture capitalists, angel investors, et cetera. There's actually another type of fundraising called debt financing or building out a credit facility. Because of Lumanu's business model and our, very strong math models and underwriting, it's essentially zero risk for us, right? We're not giving and lending money for work that's not done. We only do it once work is already complete. So we're really just floating cash to cover the traditional slow time that it takes a finance team to process these bills. Because of that, our default rates are infinitesimally small. And we can actually make pretty good return by charging a fee that's actually cheaper than PayPal. You know, if you're a freelancer getting paid via PayPal, you pay 2.9%.
Right.
Lumanu's fee is 2.9%. But unlike PayPal, you actually get paid instantly rather than having to wait, 30, 60 days. Because of that, we actually have a pretty big credit facility that we use to fund all of this. And then that facility is growing all the time, especially as we get more and more what I call data tape. So as more transactions happen and as we show that, we give money out to the freelancers, then we get paid by Walmart on time, every time, that facility grows.
Yeah. And I would assume that, you look pretty darn creditworthy, since your default rate is so low.
Yep.
And you've probably, I would assume that you've got, contracts and stuff to back it up if there was ever a case where, whomever large company was like, we can't pay this, or we don't want to pay this, or, whatever.
Yep, exactly. And for us, it's the way that we distributed our software, because we have a great relationship with all of the, what I call payers in our network. It becomes there's a lot of economy of scale. So as soon as any user in our network, for instance, works with a Walmart or works with a Toyota, gets paid a few times, anyone else, even new users that invoice Toyota for the first time, we can leverage that historical learning to make sure that we, are being safe with our underwriting.
All right, I want to jump into how you initially got creators to begin joining your platform. What was kind of the method you took to get out in front of those people and get them to sign up?
So this is where there's a little bit of trial and error. And I would encourage, any founder that's listening, there's no one right way to do everything. You sort of have to think about what is the strength of your business and your founder team. For us, our strength has always been more of a B2B to C motion. So the first batch of creators that learned about Lumanu, and we have everyone from small photographers all the way up to like Snoop Dogg and 𝙄𝙬𝘿𝙾𝙐𝙎𝙍𝙬𝙀, although I doubt they log into the app. It's probably their managers logging in. They all learned about Lumanu because they got told, hey, it's great working with you. The way that we're going to pay you is through Lumanu. And the reason we use Lumanu is because it makes life easier for you, makes life easier for us, handles all the tax compliance, paperwork, and you can get your money early if you want to. That's usually, I would say for like 95% of our users, their very first experience with Lumanu is someone told them, sign up for Lumanu, get paid. And then after that, our customer team, our marketing team, engages with them to try and show them the rest of the platform and all these other benefits. We do have some users that learn about us just through word of mouth. We don't run any advertising on Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok. So we have a pretty lean acquisition motion. But yeah, the first few customers all learned about us through the brands and agencies that paid them.
Gotcha. And that's kind of where your focus has been, not necessarily marketing to the creators, to the freelancers, but going towards those brands. And it sounds like your marketing is pretty lean. Does that mean that you make up for that with your like inside sales?
A little bit. We actually generally, for a startup at our size and our revenue, have a very lean go-to-market team of both sales and marketing. We have a very nice, what I would call like flywheel motion. A lot of companies learn about Lumanu because they get an invoice from a Lumanu user. And then from that invoice, we give it to our inside sales team, who then talks to them, right? And go, hey, Condé Nast, you saw how easy it was to pay that one or two invoice. Imagine if paying all of your, freelance talent and creators was as easy. So once that flywheel motion has started, it actually is quite lucrative. Now, early on, you're right. It's a lot of cold emailing. It's a lot of creating content to draw attention. It's a lot of word of mouth referrals and so forth. Gotcha.
So in that beginning phase, when you were rocking more sales, we heard that you had kind of an interesting approach to sales and how you think about sales. Can you tell us a little bit more about that approach?
Yeah, for sure. I, as a founder, and I tell this to all my friends and anyone that, wants to run their own business, everyone has to sell. Now, I know sales has sort of this connotation, right? Sometimes it can be sleazy. It's like, hey, am I selling things that don't exist? Am I comfortable selling vaporware? I'm trying to get people to pay. And I know it's not that intuitive to a lot of folks. And me, I'm not a natural salesperson. I was a comp sci major to start my career. The way that I framed it, which is really helpful, especially if you're just starting out, is think about sales conversations as essentially real life feedback. But there's no better way to get candid answers than when you frame it as a conversation where either people put down money at the end of the call or they tell you why they're not.
Yeah.
And both outcomes are incredibly valuable early on. And what's funny is this is true no matter if you're making a couple $1,000s a month, making zero, or making millions of dollars a month. Every time you launch a new feature, every time you talk to someone new, a yes is obviously more valuable than a no, but a no is still very valuable if you understand why. And that's what I really encourage. And I personally really love sales motions because it gives you such quick feedback. Whereas if you, for instance, spend a lot of money on a Facebook ad, you might get some results around click-through rates, conversion rates, et cetera. But it's hard to get that deeper why. Why did someone look at an ad but not convert? Or why did they put in their contact information, book a demo, but didn't show up? Then it ends up being a lot of guesswork. Whereas if you just get on a phone, meet someone in person, hop on a Zoom call, you have a captive audience and you can very much dig into the why. And that's ultimately what makes a company succeed early on, is understanding the why more than getting a yes or no.
So you were jumping on these calls. They were being kind of framed as sales calls, but were you, obviously you were probably looking to make a sale at the end of the call, but you were really looking for more of the feedback, tell me what you really think. And I love the idea of, at the end of this call, they know it's a sales call. So it's like a forced honesty kind of thing, that they can't just be like, yeah, this sounds great, I love this product. And then you're like, great, that's awesome, I'll get you signed up. And they're like, wait, I actually didn't mean any of that stuff that I just said. I wanted to make you feel better.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
or they just ghost you.
Yeah, exactly. So who were you calling when you needed to start making these calls and getting people on the other side of the phone?
Yeah. So, you have a hypothesis to start, right? You have a general idea of what problem you're solving and who's going to feel that problem the most. Then you have a general sense of what are they using today to solve that problem, if not you? And then that basically allows you to then go out and reach out to a few folks. For us, we knew early on that brands and agencies were target customers. We weren't sure how large the companies were. So a good trick that I like to use has nothing to do with, obviously everyone's an internet company now, so geography is not as important. But I just pulled up 20 to 100 contacts in New York City. I was living in San Francisco at the time and just reached out to them and actually just said, hey, I'm a Tony Tran, founder based in San Francisco. Just happen to be in New York next week. Meeting some folks, would love to see if you're up for, an in-person. And then you give them an out too, right? Hey, but also I know you're busy, so happy to hop on a 15-minute call. Here's my number. Feel free to text me. Even if you only get a few responses, that's all it takes. And I still remember vividly when we first started, I sent that email out to about 10 New York companies. 5 of them got back to us and we converted 3.
Sweet.
Those 3 became customers to this day, 3-4 years later. And they were with us from the day where I was basically selling a deck more than a product, all the way to, multiple pivots into what we are now. And we wouldn't have gotten there. Literally, I emailed a guy who, was working at a 2,000 person company.
Yeah.
And, responded almost immediately.
So this is probably more of a technical question, but if there is a 2,000 person company, that means you have 2,000 different options of people to call within that company. I'm assuming that you're looking for a very specific kind of job title within that company to call. Are you finding those via LinkedIn, or do you have some super sleuths who are getting this contact info for you? Or how do you make sure that you're connecting with the right person to make these decisions?
So LinkedIn is definitely my go-to. DM them, right? Some people put their contact information on LinkedIn. A good college friend of mine actually started a company called Apollo, APOLLO.io. Pretty much everyone uses a tool either like Apollo or Apollo itself. And that makes it really easy to find, work email addresses, for instance, based on job titles, location, company. But between those two, it's pretty quick to get, the right folks. My main thing is I would encourage to send DMs on LinkedIn, tweet at them if needed. But the important thing is just to follow up. People are busy. Just because someone didn't respond to you or didn't even open your email doesn't mean anything, right? People are busy. So just keep sending follow-ups. Remind yourself every few days to follow up.
That's good advice. So it sounds like you've got quite a bit of experience with sales and, making things happen. But what were a couple of the things that you wish that you knew at the beginning that you know now?
I would say this is something that I tell my wife this all the time in her business, and I wish I knew this before. There's this old advice, right? Like when you win a customer and they're happy with your product, you wait a while and then you ask them for referrals and introductions to anyone else. I actually find that as soon as you make that initial connection, you're in what I would call the honeymoon phase. You're talking, obviously they care enough about your email or your initial outreach to take time out of their day, right? Which is a very finite resource. No matter what happens in that call, just put your leg out there and ask them, hey, do you know anyone else? Make your ask very pointed. Do you know 2 or 3 other people who also work in New York who have a similar problem? And I find that even if you strike out most of the time, all it takes is one person to get you to 2 more meetings. And then those 2 meetings might become 4 additional meetings. Don't wait for them to sign or buy your product. Just do it right in that moment at that very first call. And I find that that's really helpful. I think right now, the way the world is, there is a human psychology of just people want to help other people, right? And they know how hard it is to be a business founder and owner. And, ask them to be honest with you. If you're completely off track, if the problem that you think was so burning actually doesn't matter, what is a problem that matters? And then who else has those problems? But I think just leveraging the natural sort of connective tissue of professional networks to get that next meeting on your first meeting, not just with that same person, but with other people in their network is really helpful. And I've seen that work whether you're selling enterprise software or you're selling, life coaching advice to employees.
I think that's really excellent advice. They always told us that in insurance. It was like, who else do you know that needs my product? But I feel like in your case, insurance is just so boring. It's like, who else do you know that needs insurance? Well, everyone I know. But in your case, it's a lot more personal. And I think that question comes across as more genuine. And so, I love that. I love that question.
And I'll give you just one example. This is where I think the art is about just understanding your space really well. I remember early on, during the pandemic, I was talking to this one creator, and she was a Broadway person who obviously had no work, and she started freelance writing. And, we were talking and she wanted to use Lumanu. She actually ended up doing some freelance writing for us. And all I said was, hey, your website looks amazing. Did you do this yourself? And she's like, no, I got someone to help me. And I was like, oh, interesting. Well, tell me more about this person. And she's like, oh, she blah, 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 like sets up these websites. She actually works with a lot of us copywriters and freelancers because we're not exactly the most artistic folks. And then she introduced me to that person, who then I found out, belonged to a collective of other sort of like freelance web designers who use this one software called Flowpad. And then I got an intro to a team at Flowpad, their community team, who then, was connected with thousands of other people, right? And it's sort of that like continuous hops. And, sometimes you hit a dead end, and that's okay. You backtrack and you try a different path. But you just never know what conversation could unlock another conversation that could unlock thousands of conversations unless you try.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you actually led me into something I wanted to ask. You've got a bunch of users now on the creator side. Well, let's talk about that. How many users are you up to right now?
We're about 40,000.
That's awesome. So you mentioned, these hops that got you to a situation where you were talking to a person that basically had access to thousands of these people who are your target user. Was there ever any sort of time or any action that you took that created a huge influx of users in one kind of go?
Well, funny, there's 2 answers to that. One is yes, there was. Ended up getting a lot of scammers, actually. So there was a period of time where we were like, this was our first time trying to run some Instagram ads. The downside to running an Instagram ad for any type of business that has to do with money is you're going to get some scammers. So that didn't work very well, but we did get a bunch of app downloads.
Sweet.
Yeah. One thing I would encourage folks, if you're just starting out, don't rely on paid media if your business has anything to do with helping people get paid. So that's number one. One of the things that we did recently that have really helped is, and actually have a person on my team that runs this program, is our ambassador program. We have this notion that it's better to go deep with a user rather than broad. So, the traditional school of thought is you go online, you pay for some type of affiliate software, you generate these referral links, and you just hand it out to every single user and hope some of them share on their LinkedIn or TikTok or what have you. We did a different approach. We wanted to give our ambassadors a sense that they truly were an extension of our team. We invited them into our Slack. I personally hopped on calls with a lot of them, understand what they loved about the product, what they didn't like, really understood who they worked with, how they found their clients, what else they needed help with, way beyond our software. And because of that goodwill, we had people that, ambassadors are not only some of our most active users, they use all of our features, they give great feedback, but they also generate a lot of referrals for us, both on the creator side, but also on the business side. To your point, when a ambassador, for instance, works with I'm going to use BMW because it's top of mind, right? And BMW is not a customer. That ambassador can use Lumanu just fine, but they can also say, hey, BMW, you really should start using Lumanu for all your, you're like one of many companies that are still sending me physical checks and I hate it. And I bet you a lot of other creators hate it too. Not to rag on BMW, but you'd be surprised at how many companies still send physical checks. So, but yeah, that's one of my encouragement is, especially early on, every single relationship is so valuable. And if you can nurture it and go deep, don't think about scale out of the gate. A lot of people are like, how can I launch an affiliate program and spend all this time building a perfect, code, referral, whatever, right? Gamification. Just hop on a call and talk to them and understand them and then get them to become an actual advocate for your business. And then they'll just share it naturally with their friends, their clients and their network.
So embrace the power user is basically the idea.
Embrace the power user. And there's really is no shortcut for human connection is what I would say. You can try to gamify it as much as you want, but when someone actually talks to you or hop on a phone or has a text thread with you, you automatically enter their inner circle relative to all these other tools that bombard them with, refer a friend, get $10 off.
So this is going to sound like an odd question and maybe we can just back into it. But do you think that you will always be a person that sets time to kind of get in there and talk with the users every once in a while? Or do you feel as though you can bring someone on, and I know you said you have a person kind of in that position already. You're obviously not managing those relationships, but you play a part in those. Do you feel as though it can work as well if you are not playing any part in those relationships?
Well, absolutely. I'll give my answer in two parts. Absolutely. My joke is always, you got to build a bridge to somewhere. Always have to keep in mind, what works today, how does it lead to version 2 that's going to work at 10 times the scale? So you always have to have an eye for a person that can actually run a program, and then how can they build a team that can run a program? So even today, I don't talk to every single ambassador anymore, but every ambassador talks to someone. And it doesn't have to be a live phone call. Gen Z sometimes hate hopping on a phone, right? They just want to text, and that's perfectly fine as well. So absolutely, I always keep an eye towards that. And the cool thing is, early on, when you force yourself to do these manual conversations, to read all the support tickets, you start to see what is really important. For instance, I found that texting is actually really awesome. People like that asynchronous text, get a response. They like that over email. They like that over Zoom. And the cool thing is you can even FaceTime them, right, if needed. So that was something that we really only learned because, we forced ourselves to do those conversations. The second part, to your point, and, maybe this is not a belief that's shared by a lot of folks, but for me, just being a product founder, I think it is critical to talk to customers like all the time. And you have to do it as much as you can in whatever form factor you have. If you were to look at my phone right now, I have an iPhone, all top 9 of my favorites, it goes my wife, my parents, like 6 users.
Nice.
And then group chats as well for like users in New York. And there's just something, and by the way, full disclosure, I have ADHD. So sometimes I just need to have a quick feedback to an idea. I just text into that little group and I get an immediate response. Now, I'm not saying that's going to replace, more thorough user research, but having that type of relationship is really critical early on because speed is everything. And the ability to pick and choose what feedback to extrapolate and make decisions on is really important, but you need those connections to begin with. It's funny, we have a user called Chris, and he checks in on me from time to time. He's a photographer. He learned about us because one of our customers paid him. And, he would just hit me up on Slack because he's on our Slack. He was like, yo, boss, what's up? What's new?
Yes.
I just came back from Hawaii. And just, a little chit chat like that, I learned, wow, he actually just got a full-time job, but he didn't stop his freelance job. Why did you want to get a full-time job, Chris? And then, through that conversation, he explained to me, well, part-time work is great, but I realized that I can do both. So why not have health insurance? I was like, whoa, interesting. So you got a full-time job just for health insurance? He was like, yeah, I have to give up some like flexibility. But, that one conversation led to more.
Right.
So it's just about, as long as what I would call, it's almost like cooking, right? As long as you just have all these ingredients around, you just never know when inspiration strikes. But the important thing is you just got to surround yourself by good ingredients.
What wording?
Yeah,
look at this guy. So. Well, I think we all need a Chris every once in a while. And I think I think the message here is don't push your Chris away, use your Chris.
Yeah, exactly.
So are those 6 users generally the same people are you talking to the same users over and over, or do you kind of like branch out? Have you made your relationships and that's kind of like where you want to hang out?
It's a little bit of both. I do have my go-to, and I try to have them be very diverse in terms of demographics, where they live, what they work on. But then the cool thing is all of them bring on additional folks. So I'll give another example. One of our very early users, gosh, I'm not going to name any names, but she makes 7 digits. So definitely very successful. Was a great source of feedback and everything. She even invested in Lumanu early on in our Series A. Found out her husband was a business manager, runs his own business. Talking to him, he was actually a really big catalyst for some of the international features we were building. Actually, he was the one that told us how, excuse my French, shitty PayPal is when it comes to paying international talent with all of their hidden fees. But like all it takes is one person introducing you to another person, and now that other person is a really big part of he's not quite on my favorite list on my text message, but he is on my my favorite on my Slack.
So I'm going to jump, and this is maybe a smaller jump than even I had imagined, since we're already talking about people who you're reaching out and helping or are, able to and willing to help you. Let's talk a little bit about mentorship and coaches. And I know that both of these types of folks out there, these relationships are something that you've got experience with. Can you first kind of tell us the difference between what a mentor does and what a coach does?
For sure. I'll start with one thing that's very simple for me. You pay coaches, you don't pay mentors. So, for me, a mentorship, you have to really treat about it as a 2-directional street, right? You're giving the mentor something as a mentee, and they're giving you something, and it's really win-win. I'm a mentor now to a lot of folks, and I've been a mentee to a lot of folks. And one thing I've learned is great people find ways to help other great people. And, through shared collaboration, networking, feedback. For me, mentorship is one step above a friend. And this is where it doesn't have to be as structured or rigid. It is not time bound as much, but you're traditionally going to be working with a mentor on what I would call swim lanes. So swim lanes could be, hey, I want to be a better salesperson. Cool. Let's work on multiple ways we can work together, right? And pick mentors that are great salespeople that you can emulate. So that is sort of my approach to mentorship. And you can find mentors usually through referrals. It's funny, one of my very first mentors, I found someone on LinkedIn who had my last name, was a co-founder. There weren't many Vietnamese entrepreneur back then, but this guy named Tran, who started Clout, if you remember, in the early days, just hit him up. It's like, hey, we have the same last name and I'm starting a company. Would love your advice as a fellow immigrant, Vietnamese founder. Unpaid relationship, right? And he loved helping me, and he ended up actually investing in Lumanu as well. So it's win-win. Gave him a lot of great returns. Coaches, in my mind, first of all, coaches are more similar to therapists than they are to mentors. You should be very comfortable with a coaching relationship being very one-way. I think that's the first thing, right? Like, don't expect to give anything back to your coaches. You're paying them for a reason. You're paying them to get better at something or to work on a very specific project. Every coaching relationship I've been in, I try to really treat it like, if you were to sit down and write a project of like, what do I want to accomplish? What is the time frame for this? You should be able to write it down, and you should be able to have a objective mutual agreement with your coaches that this is something they can help you with. How much is it going to cost? And then go about doing it. And I think this is true for executive coaching. It's true for, if you want to double your bench press or whatever, and you get a fitness coach, it's the same thing, right? It's a paid relationship. Now, I think that's the most important thing is treating it with that lens allows you to really pick out the best coach. So for me, I remember early on, I had a very specific project. I'm a first-time founder. I was able to raise a seed round. It was a bit more painful than I thought just because I just hate talking to that many people.
Right.
And I knew at the Series A, I was going to do it happen again. So I actually got a coach, not even to help me get intros or anything, but to help me approach the fundraising problem like a product problem. Right. And that was just really helpful. It was a very well-defined project. They had a very definitive end date, which was when I raised the Series A. That coaching relationship was over. Fortunately, it actually translated from that coaching relationship to another coaching project, which was around building out the executive team, hiring org chart and stuff like that. But I think that for me is the big difference. So to recap, mentorship, I really do think is a two-way street. You should give as much as you can take and you grow together, right? And then you can sort of blossom from a mentorship into friendships and so forth. Coaching, you can be friends with your coach, but I think you should go in with the mindset of like, this is no different than a physical trainer, no different than a therapist. You're paying for their time and their expertise, and you should know exactly what you want to get out of it. And if you don't know what you want to get out of it yet, take time for yourself to figure that out before you even, hire a coach. And sometimes you can actually talk to coaches as part of the discovery process of figuring out what is it that you want to work on.
So I struggle to ask this question of, which one is more valuable than the other one, but I feel as though they're for different use cases. I feel as though you can always have a mentor. You can always have someone, that you can talk to. And since it's not costing you, dollars, it's costing you time and it's costing them time and that sort of thing. But the coaches can be pretty darn expensive.
Can be, yep.
And so my guess is that you should always strive to have, at least one mentor or someone you can talk to. When do you know it's time that you need a coach specifically?
It's a great question. There really is no one size fits all answer. I would say there's probably, at least for me, so my personal experience, you're right. Coaches cost money. You have to make sure that you're in a financial state where you're not going to be worse off investing in a coach. So if you're living paycheck to paycheck and your coach takes a whole paycheck, it's probably not the best time until you figure out some other stuff first. So I think that's number one, right? Is do you have the financial resources? By the way, it's the same thing as therapy, right? Like therapists cost money. Even if you really need it, you got to ask yourself, like, can I afford it right now? To your point, like I think everyone should have at least one mentor. And then the coach, you should really figure out when a project happens, when you have a very definitive project. For me, it was very much a return on investment, right? Like I could sit down and I say, I want to raise a Series A. This is the outcome of doing successfully. And here's the consequence of not doing successfully. And, there's a big gap between success and failure, which justified an investment. And that's what, sort of made me jump through that hurdle. Fortunately, I also, as an executive coach, it's a business expense. So I was a little bit in a privileged position there.
Yeah.
But, even in like personal matters, like my wife is a life coach, there's a lot of different price points, different coaching mediums, whether it's group coaching, one-on-one coaching, live coaching, asynchronous coaching. There's always different price points. And I think that's something that people just have to figure out. But at the end of the day, I would just encourage, think about what is the very defined, well-defined project or outcome you want. How much time are you willing to invest into it and how valuable is it to you? And don't underestimate the value of your time, right? Like how much money do we spend on food and working out and stuff like that? It's coaches is the same thing. It's self-care. It's helping you get better. It's a gym membership, right?
I think that's some pretty darn deep insight right there. Okay. So that's an awesome answer on the when of getting a coach, but let's talk a little bit about more your personal experience. What's the biggest benefit that you've ever gotten from a coaching relationship?
So this is a really great question. I think everyone is a little bit different. For me personally, just based on just to give you a lens into how I was raised, my dad always taught me, you're basically by yourself. That's how he grew up. Didn't get help from anybody. And, it sort of stuck with me through college and through the early years of my career. One thing I would say is being a founder or a business owner or blazing your own path can be incredibly lonely sometimes. And the mental health side of it is really insane. And if you're like me, you care about your friends. You don't want to be the person that keeps bothering them and asking for hours and dinners just to complain and to put stuff on their plate. And I think for me, having a coach, and every coach knows this, and again, it goes back to my whole one-way street thing, just having someone that you can text to in a safe environment to complain. An employee said something that you felt like was really offensive to you, maybe your character, but you couldn't say anything in a moment and you just wanted someone to vent to process, in a work setting, right? So a little bit different than a therapist. Although there's nothing wrong with having a therapist and a coach. But I just love having that type of relationship. Like both coaches that I have a text thread with them where something random happens, or I'm just like, hey, I have this huge migraine and I had to bounce on an investor call. I'm feeling pretty guilty right now. And they'll just, tell you like, hey, it's not going to be the first time. It's not going to be the last time. And a lot of other people do the exact same thing. Or I say like, hey, I've never felt like there were so many fires I have to put out and I can only put out a couple of fires. Or I would say things like, hey, it's Sunday, I'm watching football and I'm feeling guilty about not working. Just having another person tell you it's okay to not do X, or it's okay to feel some way, just makes it feel like you're not alone. And I think that is so incredibly important. There's a metaphor that I always say, starting a business is like being a cockroach. You're just going to have to get stepped on and tackled, and a lot of things have to go wrong before just enough goes right. And it's just a matter of how persistent you are. And it definitely helps to have someone in your corner. I'm lucky that, literally my partner is a coach. So I get it from both the partnership side and the coach side. And I have an actual executive coach as well. But, if you're single or you don't have many friends, or maybe you just moved to a new city, just having someone, even someone that you have to pay, it's really helpful. And it makes you feel like you're not alone on your journey.
So you said 2 coaches. Is one of those coaches your wife?
Yeah.
Okay.
Luckily, I don't have to pay for it either. But, yeah.
The coaching is such, an important piece. And everyone always talks about sports, like even the people that are the best in the world at a sport, still have a coach. And so there are people out there that think that asking for help is weakness. And that could not be further than the truth. I think that asking for help could look like getting a coach. Yeah. And I think that's actually a signal of strength.
Agreed 100%.
So let's begin to wrap here. This has been a lot of fun, but I know you've got plenty more things to do in your day. So you're currently solving the issue of payments for creators, but what's next? What's the next problem that y'all are going to solve? And you mentioned healthcare in there, and I really hope that that's the answer, but I'm just projecting. And if you say yes, that is, then I'm coming to work for you. Let's do it.
Well, the answer is yes. Next year, we have a whole slate of things we want to work on, from healthcare to business banking. For me, I think the value is there a way that we can leverage the combination of a few things so that the sum of the parts is bigger than the parts itself, right? Imagine a world where if you're a creator, being able to receive money through Lumanu can automatically help subsidize your health insurance, because very similar to like an employer, we have a pretty good understanding of your income, your expenses, and we can set you up the right plan versus you trying to navigate, the government websites on your own. So there's a couple of things there that, definitely we want to work on. And the second thing that I'm very excited about, and we're actually piloting this right now, is our creator directory. We realize that over time, just having a way for the people that are looking for talent to be able to find the talent is really helpful. Whether the talent is independent, small agency owner. I think the world is heading towards a state now where even Lumanu, we leverage a lot of freelance marketers, freelance copywriters. There's a lot of other companies out there just like us. Especially as we go through, unfortunately, a lot of tech layoffs right now. There's just a lot of great talent out there that are going to be professional, independent workers. But that's something I'm really excited about as well. Not only can we help you get paid fast, we can help you get paid more by connecting you with your future customers and clients. So,
heck yeah. That's awesome. I'm stoked for this. And you might get a message from me later saying that we're gonna team up and solve healthcare for the world.
Yeah,
Yes.
for sure. For all of those that don't have a W-2, 9-to-5 job, right?
Yep. My heart goes out to every one of you out there. All right. What is your number one piece of advice for early stage entrepreneurs?
I would say go out there and have as many conversations as you can. Call them sales conversations, call them research conversations, call them networking, whatever it takes, but just pitch your business. Don't be shy. And don't let perfection be the enemy of good. Every response is a productive response. You might not like it. If you're like me and you have severe rejection sensitivity, it takes a while getting used to. You say something and people don't immediately respond with the most enthusiasm, but that's okay. And then just ask why, and then ask why again. Keep asking why until you figure out how to move forward.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. One last question. Where can people connect with you online, and how can our listeners support Lumanu?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. It's funny, my Vietnamese name is Hugh. So just LinkedIn, Humanity, 𝙬𝙬𝘖𝑚ANITY. So Humanity is spelled my first name. I'm also on Instagram. So 𝙄𝙁𝙿𝙄𝙎𝑠. And yeah, the way to find Lumanu, like I said, was we're in the App Store. If you're an independent freelancer creator, you can actually just go on the App Store and download the app. And that's all it takes. It's completely free. You can start invoicing, getting paid. And like I mentioned, as we roll out all these other features around health insurance, taxes, helping you find work, that's all going to be loaded into the app.
Awesome. Well, we're going to put all of those notes to the LinkedIn, to the Instagram, to Lumanu. We're going to put everything in the show notes. And thank you so much for being here today. This has been a ton of fun.
Likewise. A lot of fun. Thanks for having me, Ethan.
And that's going to be it for this week's episode of the Startup Savant podcast. Thanks for listening. If you're a startup founder who wants to share their entrepreneurial journey on the show, drop us a line at podcast@truic.com. That's TRUIC.com. And if you're not, make sure you're subscribed to the show so you don't miss any of the fantastic guests we have lined up for you. See you next week.
The Startup Savant podcast is produced by Truic.